Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Yankee and Canuck podcast, a show where we discuss TV, film, and more.
And I'm your host, a Yankee.
And I'm your host, Canuck.
And today we're going to be talking about cinema buns, cinema rolls, cinnamon sticks,
Cimarron.
Cimarron. We're talking about Cimarron. It's the fourth movie to win Best Picture. It's the first Western to win Best Picture. And this movie was completely boring. I did not like it. I also read the book, and I saw the remake, the 1960 remake. And all iterations of this particular story, I was just falling asleep again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It was a boring film. I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't go to the lengths like you did, reading the book and watching the remake. No, I'm good. Thank you for taking that effort and sharing that with us. I think this was nominated for 7 Academy Awards total, and it won 3, I think. Obviously, Best Picture.
Yeah, because the book was really popular. It was written by Edna Ferber, and it was a very popular novel during the Great Depression era, because it was during that time where, the Great Depression hit, and people wanted, escapism. So this book became very popular during that time. This is the early 20th century, so there were still people around during the Old West period. They were old, they were dying off slowly but surely. So there was that romanticized period of like, oh, the Wild West, things were freer, things were more exciting. And that book kind of like rekindled that, interest.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why it was so popular when it came out. And it did really well, right? It was a very successful film. And for those reasons you mentioned, I think captivated a lot of people, and the production was really good in the film. I'll give it that, even though I didn't like it, you didn't like it. In retrospect, I think most people, the sentiment is shared that movie's not that great and maybe overrated and definitely didn't deserve Best Picture. I think that's fair to say. Or it's one of the weaker of the Best Picture films, I should say.
The only compliment I could really give this film is that the sets were big and grand, and there were a lot of extras, so it felt like a big, lively town. So you could definitely see where a lot of the money was spent. Yeah, I did not enjoy the main character. I did not enjoy the exploits of that main character. I did not. The performances were fine. I can't complain with the performances per se, but it's more about the characterization, how the characters were written, the journey. Before we get any further, let's just explain what Cinema Bun is all about. Cimarron is all about.
Cinema Bun.
Cinema Bun.
That's what we watched, y'all. Cinema Bun.
We saw Cinema Bun. So Cimarron is about the tale of Yancey. What the fuck is his last name?
Who gives a Yancey something. Yancey who knows everyone on the freaking planet, who's friends with everybody, who has every profession apparently in town.
Yeah. But Cimarron is about Yancey Cravat, who is a man who is incredibly ambitious. Yes, he is a master of all trades. He can apparently do anything. He knows everyone. Takes his young wife out in the middle of Oklahoma because, I gotta go get some land out there. There's some land that we can claim. It's unclaimed land. Let's completely forget the Native Americans exist. It's unclaimed land. We white folk are gonna go out there and claim it. And they go, and there's a town there already, and there's a lot of exploits. And then Yancey's like, all right, I hear there's land out yonder, out west, so I'm gonna go and get that land. He leaves his wife and kids there. Meanwhile, his wife inherits this newspaper company or something that Yancey was in the middle of owning and running and stuff like that. So Sabra Cravat ends up inheriting this newspaper mill, and then some time passes, and then towards the end of the film, Sabra is like a really old woman, and she's now a congressperson somewhere, I think in Oklahoma, I don't know, somewhere out there. And then Yancey, turns out his old decrepit ass is working for like an oil rig because they found oil somewhere, and I think in Oklahoma, in the place where they were staying at.
Yep.
And then he does this heroic thing where he dies valiantly or something because the oil rig exploded. And then Sabra's like, oh, my old husband who abandoned me, I'm gonna go back, and oh, he's here, he's dying in my arms. The end. That's how it ends in the book. That's how it ends in the movie.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums up the movie. Of course, a lot did occur throughout the film, but it's pretty boring, man, and the pacing isn't good. I'll be honest with you, when I started the film, even the opening intro music, it sounded promising at first. I was like, ooh, this has a little intensity to it. It had almost like a dreadful sound to it. And then it completely went 180. It went positive, and it was just totally different. It's like going from a Tartarus theme song to an Elysian Fields theme song the next moment. I was like, what's happening here? But I mean, just from the start, the sound mixing wasn't great. And not just the music, just the mixing itself. And I felt the need for subtitles, partly because of the sound, but in addition to the manner in which they speak. I mean, the movie came out in 31, right? But the story takes place in 1890, I think, 1892. And everyone's white. I mean, they're white, and so the opening sequence, someone says something like, "Oh, Buckaroo, rickety yee-haw, you old briar patch, you," and I'm like, "What the hell did that guy just say?"
Yeah.
I'm turning subtitles on right now.
I completely agree with the sound mix because like when I saw it, I was just like, is this the copy that I'm listening to? Was this a really bad film scan or something? Because
Yeah,
in the opening scene where there's like a big crowd and I guess they're all gathering around to do this big race, and the first one to get to this location, they get the land or something like that. So
yeah,
there's a corral of all these people just like bunched up together, and everyone's talking at once. It's kind of like with Broadway Melody in the opening scene where there's a
exactly.
bunch of music happening. It's the same thing here, but there's a bunch of people. I'm like, I understand there's a big crowd and stuff like that, and there were a lot of extras. Props to them. That is not easy to do. But however, I can't hear. So there could have been some reining in for some of the extras. Be like, hey, listen, could you pretend to talk and we can maybe dub you in? But maybe that
Exactly.
process wasn't the standard practice probably back then. So they were like, listen, guys, we're working with sound, so let's do the best we can, I guess.
In their defense, maybe some of these extras and the actors involved don't have a whole lot of experience with talkies, right? So a lot of them coming from silent films. So maybe that's a factor we have to take into account. But either way, like you said, like we both said, the sound mixing wasn't great from the start,
Yeah.
and just the way they went about it, let alone the language. Like I said, I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's time for the subtitles to turn on, and I try to avoid subtitles.
Oh, I love subtitles because modern day movies have that problem too with the sound mixing. But yeah, with this older film, it was rough because when you can't understand anyone, you can't follow the stories, and that's already a bad sign from the get go.
Yeah, it's true.
I will
But yeah,
say
that
though, the resulting stampede from that was pretty cool though. I give props for that. You know, horses were falling off, even though I feel bad for the horses. You know, I don't like the way animals were treated during this time because,
yeah,
you know, they're getting hurt and possibly
yeah.
dying for what entertainment. Personally, I don't like that. But, you know, it does make the scene feel more authentic because it was authentic.
The beginning was pretty wild. I mean, I gotta say that. I guess it's a relatively famous opening scene. I'm not familiar with it. I've never seen this movie before, but the sequence was massive. I mean, you have horses and caravans and Conestogas. Those are those big wagons with that are fully covered.
Yeah, there was a dude on a bike too.
It was
I thought that was kind of
a modern day bicycle, e-bike.
Was it modern day? I don't know. It was that big ass
no.
wheel in the front.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
So
thought
you had those, you had the Conestoga wagons. Yeah, I mean, you basically had everyone screaming, going full speed to grab, steal land. I think some caravans even, I saw in the distance, some of them broke an axle, and I heard someone got dysentery and died. That might have been from the Oregon Trail when I was playing that back in the day, or it was in the film. I don't know. It could have happened. But yeah, that sequence was pretty intense. I read that it took about a week to shoot it. They had several thousand extras, and so
that's
definitely a massive sequence and impressive.
a week is pretty good, I think, for something as massive as that and in
Yeah,
as many shots as yeah, a lot of compliments to the way they shot that because that looked very complicated to do. It looked like people got hurt during the making of that. So I mean, there were some
yeah,
crazy stunts. So yeah, so that was impressive at least. That's like pretty much
yeah,
the only real compliment I could give to the film.
yeah. Yeah, the scene was it was a good scene. I mean, it was intense, and it's like, whoa. So that's what's going to go on in this movie. And it all goes downhill from there. But no,
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Because after that,
28 cameramen in that sequence too. Apparently, they had 28 cameramen.
yeah, I think I believe that. It's a lot,
Yeah,
you know, especially back then. The cameras
yeah,
and the film stock and stuff, that's not cheap at all.
expensive. Yeah,
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when the film came out, it didn't really recoup all its costs. It was successful, but it wasn't incredibly successful. So it wasn't until the re-release came in a few years later where they were able to make some money off of that film.
but yeah, like you said, first Western to win Best Picture, of course. Another Western never won, right? Until what, 90? No.
Dances with
What was the
Wolves, I
next one?
believe, 1990.
Yeah, 1991. Yeah,
Yeah,
1990. Yeah,
yeah.
Kevin
Then
Costner.
yeah, then
And
then Unforgiven won.
that was
Short,
following year. Yeah, I love that movie. That's a good one.
and then No Country for Old Men is considered a western, and that's the only other western that
Yeah,
won Best
yeah.
Picture.
Back in
And
'07, I think. Yeah,
out of all the westerns that won Best Picture, this is definitely the worst one.
hands down the worst one. Yeah, from best to worst, it'd be Unforgiven, No Country, Dances with Wolves, and then this movie.
I have to agree with that. This
It's a shame. I mean, there's so many other good Western movies that came out between the '50s and '70s. There's so many good ones, of course. I don't know if any of them got nominated, maybe, but definitely no other ones won Best Picture. But I guess Western was probably kind of neglected, maybe not to the degree of horror movies, of course. which don't even get me started on that.
It is what it is. But here we are. That whole stampeding scene and all that stuff, which is also in the book as well. It's in the book. It's told through Yancey. It's told as a big like when I was there, all this crazy stuff happened. There was an old man. And there was a crazy lady. We're all looking for land. The old man got run over because there's a scene I think where an old man gets run over. In the book, that was just like one of the guys trying to find land and stuff. And then there's this lady. He was trying to find land. She tried to leap over. He leapt over like a hole or something like that on the ground. I don't know what you call that.
Yeah, there was like a ravine, a ditch ravine.
Yeah, there you go.
Crossing,
Jumped over a ravine, and she fell down. The horse died, and then she stole his horse and got his land, some like that.
Yeah, that was I think that was Dixie Belle, the character Dixie Belle, who shows up again later in the film. I actually thought that was except for what happened to the horse, that was messed up. But
yeah,
I thought it was pretty funny that she stole his horse because he was trying to help her because her horse, she fell, and then she just runs, takes his horse, and I'm like, what a dumbass.
Yeah, I know, right? She
got played.
You got played, boy. And yeah, but then we get into like we get into Sabra's family though, because then we get into him. He's just telling all these tales of all this stuff that happened out in the West, and Sabra is basically like, okay, I guess I'll get roped into this, whatever. I like this guy or whatever. Yeah. And at that point, I believe they already had a kid. And that's the little kid who's called Cimarron, and they call him Sim for short. The only other character of note, because there's a lot of characters in this particular scene, but the only other character of note is the little black kid, Isaiah, which is a very racist caricature of it's terrible. It's just awful.
There's a lot of racism in this film.
Yeah, in the book it's even worse, because in the book, it's page 5 of the book. The author refers to him as a simian version of a ceiling angel. Yeah. We're off to a rough start even in the book, so...
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes in the movie that are questionable. And
he's perched up on this platform, fanning these white people down below. And then there's a comedic scene, which is also in the book, where he falls ass first into a bunch of cakes, and then he just runs off.
He's basically their slave.
Yeah, he basically is. And this is post-Emancipation Proclamation, I believe, but he's still basically their slave boy. And I was like, okay. Yeah. Okie dokie.
But yeah, like I said earlier about Yancey, who's the main character, it just was, puzzling to me when they're traveling. They're going from Wichita, Kansas to Oklahoma, and the movie takes place in Oklahoma, in Osage territory. Yes. And he knows everybody. Everyone he runs into knows him. And I'm like, how does he know all these people? Everybody, oh, I know you. Like, what?
Yeah.
And so I found that was very strange. And then, like you were saying, he owns that newspaper. He's a publisher and editor, settler, of course.
Yeah, it's called the Oklahoma Whigham, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, so he edits that. He's a publisher. He's also an attorney. He's also unofficially the sheriff. He's unofficially the mayor. He's also a preacher or minister at the church. He runs for governor. I mean, what's next? I mean, he's also Batman, and he's going to become governor. He's emperor. I don't know. This dude's everything, man. But what?
I know, right? I know, and unfortunately, that's just the way he's written the book, also. Because the thing with this film is that they very closely follow the book, which they kind of abandoned when it came to the remake. They took certain things, but then rewrote certain things. But in the book, Yancey is considered like this folk hero. He's like this mythical figure that can do no wrong. Because in the book, one of the good qualities about Yancey is that he's very sympathetic to Native Americans, whereas his wife is incredibly racist towards them, which is a good character arc, because she's very racist at first, but then her son grows up and ends up marrying Ruby, who's a little Native American girl who's the daughter of a chief. And, because Isaiah at some point dies, and then she becomes a little servant girl, but for hire, and then, the kids, Sim and her, end up, kind of getting along, and then they grow up and they end up marrying. And so she's just like, you are not marrying that Native American girl, calls her something else. I'm not going to say it. And then by the end, though, she becomes a congresswoman, and then she becomes less prejudiced, and she has grandkids who are mixed, and she ends up realizing, like, I shouldn't be racist. This is not cool, which is good. That's a good character arc for Sabra and Sim, I feel. Yancey is just like, I do good at all times. There's nothing wrong with me. Oh, you're boring.
Which she doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's more. She has a character arc. She's more interesting. But we go through. But we do everything through Yancey. It's like, I'm a good old boy.
Yeah, I thought he was. He's a jackass. I mean, he's pompous. He's annoying. He's ridiculous. I mean, he's got this career. He's got this home, well established in this town, and he keeps like leaving his wife and kids for years on end.
Yeah, like, for land. I need more land. You're an asshole, dude. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
he's an asshole. I don't,
It's just like straight up. But in the book too, I mean,
ridiculous.
like, yeah, he could do no wrong. He's
Yeah,
also
heart and
rumored
cold or whatever. Apparently,
all that crap, and also allegedly he in the book it said like he's rumored to be half Native American, which is why he's sympathetic towards Native American causes. And in the book, it's highlighted that he has, he's got like certain features. He's got long straight hair and stuff. There's more allusions to the fact that he's probably half Native American, which is why he's this way. So I don't know. Take that
in the
as you
novel,
will.
at least.
In
Yeah,
the
the film
novel,
doesn't really.
in the
Yeah.
film, he's just straight up a white dude. Uh, one of the things I told you too is that in page 2 of the book, the family, Sabras family, is referred to as handsome and inbred.
Wow.
So I was kind of thinking like, what? So imagine The Hills Have Eyes if it was a western. That's immediately what I thought of.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, I remember you actually messaged that.
Man, they should actually do that. Like, do The Hills Have Eyes, but as a western. That'd be so crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think. I'm sure it's maybe been done, but if not, someone's got to do it.
What did you think of that the big shootout scene? It started out interesting. You see Yancy leave the building and he does like this slide right into the ditch and then starts shooting, and it was actually
Yeah.
kind of a decent sequence at first. It just trailed on a little too much, and
Yeah. The only thing I remember is that the one where Isaiah dies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing I remember.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Yancy got shot in the arm and like didn't
Oh, yeah,
even
that's
phase
right.
him at all. Like as if nothing happened. I was like, what?
Oh yeah,
Dude got shot. It's like, oh, whatever.
yeah. I mean, in the book, it's actually more abstract in the book, but he dies also in the book Isaiah. But you don't know exactly how he dies. You just know that the kid comes into town and causes a ruckus, and then there's a big thing that happens. In the movie, it's more specific as to what happens. And in the remake, it's actually way better constructed because the kid actually has a more prominent role, and you understand his deal way better than the source material. And the shootout is more interesting in that because in the shootout in this film, it's just like a random shootout in the middle out in the town, right? It's like a typical Western setup.
There's a group of bandits, outlaws, who actually Yancy knows one of them because they go way back. And Yancy knows everybody on planet Earth, so
Yeah,
so the outlaw leader and Yancy have a moment before he kills him. It's like, sorry, man. And so yeah, that's the shootout because they want to raid the town and whatever, rob the bank and whatever
yeah,
outlaws do at that time.
yeah.
And,
It wasn't really clearly stated. They were just bad. That's all we know. Of course,
yeah, I mean, they're just shooting windows for no reason, and that's why Isaiah went to go save Sim because Sim was missing. So he went out to go get Sim and bring him back into the house, and unfortunately got caught in the crossfire. And
yeah,
everybody's shooting everywhere. Windows are getting shot out in every building, and it's just complete chaos.
exactly. Yeah, which there's an event, there's a reason for it to be set up, but it was kind of very like it felt very made up.
Yeah.
On spot, like, hey, I guess we need an action scene. How about we do a thing where like Yancey, who apparently is the most affable man on the planet, knows these outlaws, and the outlaws come in and there's a shootout. Okay, like without a second thought, but really, that's why the remake is better in this respect because there's in the remake the kid is I guess he's based on Billy the Kid or something. So the kid knows Yancey, and Yancey is like, kid, you gotta straighten out. You can't go on like this. And the kid's like, I know Yancey, but come on, I got nothing in my life, and la la la, that whole thing. So that goes on, and there's a scene later on where he's with the gang, the kid, and the gang's egging him on, the peer pressuring him to like keep going, keep doing what they're doing. Like, we're already too deep, kid. We got to keep going. There's no turning back now. That whole thing, and then it ends with the pivotal event. In that film is that they actually hold a school hostage and they're holding the little kids hostage, and one of them one of the gang members uses the kid as a human shield, which the kid finally grows a conscience and he's just like, you can't do this, and then he ends up getting shot and dies in Yancey's arms and stuff. So is it a more stereotypical setup? Yes. Is it easier to follow? Absolutely. There's more there as opposed to the original book and this movie where it just seems like a random senseless shooting. So
yeah, okay, interesting. I didn't know that. Actually.
The remake is not that great either, but it's better in those. It's better in some respects, and that's one of them.
You don't recommend I watch the remake, do you?
No, skip it. Pretend it does not exist. It's not worth watching. It's better in some respects, and it's more like, again, the feminist attributes to Sabra completely stripped away in the remake. It's like she's not a congressperson at the end or none of that stuff. She doesn't stand up for herself. She doesn't stand up to Yancey. She's just like a typical, like, oh, Yancey, I am your woman. Why are you going away? Oh,
Oh, no.
where is she? Oh, that's Sabra in the remake. It's terrible. It's awful.
Jeez, yeah, I'm gonna skip that.
Yeah, skip it entirely. And in the remake, Sim doesn't really exist until halfway through the film. There's a lot of omissions and rewrites and stuff like that. There's no overt racism in that, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, it's a better film in some respects. But it's also, it goes back a couple of steps in other respects. Skip it. Not worth watching.
There is a trial scene towards the end of the film. Of course, Yancey, who does everything, he becomes her attorney, and she's on trial for prostitution, I think, or I think became
Yeah.
a prostitute, but she's.
That's the thing. It's not explicitly stated in the movie as far as I was aware.
I
She's
think it
just on
said
trial.
public nuisance. I think is they mentioned public nuisance, but
Yeah, you know what?
but she definitely had to do things because she explains it on trial, which is pretty intense. That because of the events that occurred in her life, which weren't even her fault, they just were carried. They stuck with her, and so she wasn't able to find work, and everyone was mistreating her. Society was letting her down.
But it's very
And
but it's very nondescript, correct? For the most,
yeah,
it's very vague. Yeah, and here's the thing in the book, because when I saw that in the movie, I was like, okay, well, I'm getting that part in the book. Hopefully, they explain it more. This is basically how they explain in the book. Dixie is on trial. She is, and then Yancey's like, for what? She's on trial. For what? Well, and they don't explain. I guess I'll represent her. Why? Because I have to. Why? I need to. And then they do it. So It's not explained at all why she's on trial. It's just that she's on trial. So the whole chapter to me, it just reads to me like Edna was just like,
I want to make my book, and the book is going to be about stuff, about the town.
and the editor was probably like, Edna, this is not good enough. You need to have more characterization. Yancey's a lawyer, right? How about one of the townspeople is in trouble under false pretenses and he has to defend him?
I don't want to do that.
Well, you got to do something, Edna, because this is not working out.
Fine. I read the chapters. There's a character, she's on trial, and that's it.
Okay, good. What's she on trial for?
She's on trial.
I understand that, but for what?
Listen, you want me to write a trial? I'm going to write a trial. And then when I'm done, Yancey wins the end.
That's how I read. I imagine in my recreation of that is how the whole thing happened, because that's how it reads and that's how it's presented in the film.
Yeah, I think the film. The only thing that sticks in my mind is someone mentioned it may have been during the trial, or when he found out, and someone mentioned something public nuisance, and so I don't. What is that? A misdemeanor? Is that a felony? What the hell does that even mean?
Yeah, they couldn't even make shit up for the movie. So
I mean, they do state that she will have representation, which obviously is her right. But Yancey's all like, "Yes, and it shall be me. It must be me, and only me," which obviously upsets his wife, Sabra. And she's like, "Why do you have to be the one to represent her?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're not even a lawyer, bro. You're a newspaper dude. Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
You didn't pass the bar.
Yeah, but like,
You're just a settler who runs a newspaper shop, man."
but yeah, but he's a good.
But no, he does everything.
He does everything. He's a good bullshitter. Apparently, he goes up to the jury, makes a bullshit speech that doesn't really make any sense, and they're like, "We, the jury, find Dixie not guilty."
Yeah, I mean, he basically quotes the Bible a bunch, wins over the jury, and that's that, right? Case adjourned.
I don't even remember what the town was called. Do you remember?
I don't remember what it became, but obviously they settled there in that part of Oklahoma, and which I think was actually Osage land.
Yeah,
right?
I think
obviously.
it was. Yeah, it was called Osage. Yeah, actually.
Which is a whole region, right? And so it was settled by them. Then they had this town established, and then the movie goes on for decades, and then it's a major, city. And I think the movie covers a 40-year period,
something like that. Yeah, yeah. We go from like the late 19th century, and then we end at the early 20th century. So yeah, it does cover a good couple of decades. Yeah, but ultimately the atmosphere of the film is the best thing about the film, and it's the same thing with the book. The best thing about the book is the atmosphere. Edna was way more interested in talking about the details of the town and the things that people were doing in the town and the history of what was going on than the characters themselves. It was so abundantly clear reading this thing, like, this lady did not give one shit about her characters.
Yeah.
And of the characters that did have interesting things going on, she did not explore them further. It's like she did not care. It's like she got a little dollhouse and she's just like, look at my dollhouse. And then this character they're cooking in the kitchen. This one's raking the leaves out in the lawn. What are the characters' names? Who cares? Look how pretty my house is. That's what it felt like reading this damn thing.
Yeah.
And of course, they adapted that in the movie, and the movie, as a result, felt like that. It felt like it was more about seeing how pretty the scenery is as opposed to what was actually in it, which is why the film is so goddamn boring.
Yeah, there's a story, and then they kind of detract and kind of go into different angles, and it just doesn't really hold up, in my opinion. I would have actually liked to see a little bit more of how the town was really established. Like, they go into it a little bit, but I wanted to see maybe a little, and this may be boring for some people, but the process of how it was grown and expanded. Could have got into a little bit more details like that instead of, kind of all over the place at times. And
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, it depends on how you go about it, because it was territory that was shared by Native Americans, and it wasn't until they found out there was actual oil on the land and was on reservations where, it's kind of like the plot for that Martin Scorsese film. The recent one.
Yeah. Killers of the Flower Moon. Actually, this movie kind of goes into that directly.
Yeah.
Because especially towards the end of the movie, it leads into the Osage oil boom, and they discuss it in the film.
Yeah.
Of course, we know what happened at that time.
Unfortunately,
if you've seen Killers of the Flower Moon or read the book, so they don't go into the details of those troubling times. Of course, if you haven't seen Scorsese's film, it's a movie about the real-life murders of the Osage tribal members at the hands of those greedy white people who wanted to steal the oil that was found on tribal land. Seriously vile and evil stuff that went down.
Exactly.
And so this movie does briefly touch on that part of history without actually mentioning the murders and the tragedy. It does kind of segue.
It's very whitewashed. Yeah. I mean, in the film, especially in the book, it doesn't go into anything about those murders or anything like that, but it does paint the Native Americans in both a favorable and an unfavorable light, So it makes me, I don't know, like Edna Ferber, I don't know what her motivations were going into this book.
Yeah.
I know she was very old-fashioned, let's just put it very kindly, when it came to like non-white people, but and describing them, but there was humanity in the non-white characters as well, but it was very mixed. She was more interested in the feminist agenda in it, because when it came to the main character Sabra, she was a very flawed woman, but she was also forced to take control in certain situations, depending on what happened during the town. Like there was one point she was upstaged by a man saying because she was very naive when buying a house at one point. That was a big chip on her shoulder, led to her being very political, and ultimately ends up becoming a congresswoman in the book and also in the movie. So I mean, like there are a lot more feminist qualities in the book than anything else. Secondary there are some civil rights kind of like messaging as well. But at the end of the day, it's just a very, very unflattering book when it comes to non-white people. So it's very mixed. So it's very, I don't know. And you get that a lot. But again, it's a product of its time.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, and as a matter of fact, when you look at the critical assessment of the film, of course, people were very favorable of the film at the time when it came out. But then upon review many decades later, people were like, yeah, this film's not good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, retrospectively speaking, the consensus is very different now, and opinions have changed, as they should. I mean, obviously, a lot of these movies, that's going to be the case, and a lot of these films, they don't hold up like they used to, and some of these films, maybe they weren't that great to begin with, and so here we are. Well, let me ask you something.
Yes, sir.
Would you rather watch this again or Broadway Melody?
You know what? I rated Broadway Melody lower. And when we get to the ratings of this, I'm not going to be flattering with the rating. That being said, Cimarron, even though there's a lot of good qualities in terms of the set design and the stunts and all that stuff, it is such a goddamn boring film. I'd probably rather watch Broadway Melody again, because at least there's some interesting in Broadway Melody that's not really in Cimarron at the end of the day.
But you know what, I would agree with that. I would say so. Yeah, this movie, the pacing is definitely even worse, and it seems like and it is boring. I would say Broadway is more of annoyance. It's more of an annoying
Yeah,
film, but
it is.
but but this is more like painfully slow, and so I
Yeah,
mean, occasionally something interesting happens in this film. Let's be real, but that's just for a moment, and then it goes back to being slow and boring. And
yeah, yeah. I
even the
mean,
acting, like you said, at times it's okay in one scene, and then you go again, and it's just exposition rubbish and just not good acting. So it's kind of all over the place at times.
yeah. Honestly, if I were to really, if this was my story personally, and I were to do it, I would not put the focal point on Yancey. I would make him like a very absent father figure, and I would put the emphasis on either Sabra or Sim, because it's called Cimarron anyway. What couldn't have been the perspective of the kid? And you got
Yeah.
this kid who grows up. It's in the film and also in the book where he's a little kid. When you're a little kid, you're basically a blank slate. You don't know how the world works just yet. So in the movie, especially, he's like a 5, 6 year old little kid, and he meets with a Native American. He gives him a gift, and he's like, "Oh, look, this guy gave me a gift." And then Sabra's just like, "Don't let that filthy man give you anything." Blah 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 blah. She's very racist, of course.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bother Sim because very early on it's shown that this guy's cool. What's wrong with that? And in the book, he hangs out with the Native Americans more. And then, of course, he gets involved with Ruby. And through Ruby, he ends up hanging out with her family on the reservation. And he ends up taking peyote. There's a whole chapter about that. And he gets blasted out of his mind. And he's just like, he has an enlightenment period. I'm like, why couldn't we just follow his story? His story is way more interesting. Like, I would put the perspective of him being like, yeah, my father was absent. My mother's a racist. And yeah, I'm white. However, the natives are cool. They get a bad rap, and and I don't know why, and I'm going to be their champion, because someone's got to be a champion. That's a white savior kind of mentality, but at the end of the day, it's a more interesting perspective compared to Yancey be like, I do no wrong. Uh-huh. That's it. You're very interesting, boy. Yes. Or Sabra was just like, I am disgusting and all the way to the end. And you're just like, no. I don't know. That's what I would have done personally. But otherwise, it's just like, no. I would have checked out of this film a long time ago had I not had the obligations to do a podcast about this.
Yep, here we are.
Yeah. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts.
Well, to really wrap this thing up, this movie was kind of a waste of time, in my opinion. It's baffling to me why this won Best Picture. The only reason this probably won Best Picture was because it was a very popular book, and some people probably liked the book, even in Hollywood, and they're like, just give it to him. That's what it kind of felt like. I don't know if there was any more sinister intentions behind that. I mean, this was produced under RKO Pictures, so I don't think our buddy Louis B. Mayer had anything to do with this winning. So
Not this time.
Not this time. I didn't look up to see what else was in competition for this, so who knows? But yeah, I mean, ultimately, very boring film, very not worth watching. I'd say if you're trying to look up any Best Picture winners and you're starting from scratch, I'd say skip over this. It's not worth watching at all.
I mean, I can see why many people liked this film back in the day. And like I mentioned earlier, there wasn't a whole lot like it at the time, but as we mentioned, it doesn't really hold up, even if the production was good and the acting was okay at times. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, I don't know what other movies were nominated that year, but I can tell you there's a lot of movies that came out in 31 that I'm a big fan of that weren't nominated, that should have been, that are way better than this movie and everything else probably that was nominated. You had Bela Lugosi in Dracula in 31. You had Frankenstein in 31. You had Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 31. I think White Zombie came out in 31. That might have been 32. I could be wrong. Also with Bela Lugosi. So there was a lot of great films coming out. Yes, I'm biased. I love horror films and I love Universal horror productions. But those are great movies. And the fact that this movie won and those movies didn't get any credit at that time by the Academy, I mean,
Yeah, that's a disgrace, man.
speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a long history of the Academy being biased against like horror films and sci-fi films.
Sure, yeah.
So
They still are to some degree. They still are.
And I'm even looking up just for the hell of it, like what else was up for contention. An adventure film that's set in Africa that does not look very flattering, called Trader Horn. Skippy, is based off a comic strip. Front Page, which
That sounds familiar, actually.
what Front Page?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
this is a screwball black comedy film.
Okay.
It's not starring anyone in particular that I'm aware of. And then the last one was East Lynne, which is let's see, what is this? It's a
Fair enough.
melodrama of some kind. So I don't know. I mean, nothing looked like particularly interesting other than the films you mentioned, but in
Yeah.
terms of what was nominated, nothing stands out really. So I think people were
Yeah.
just kind of like, we're doing another one of these, right? Another Best Picture award ceremony. What's out for contention? Yeah, just pick these films. Let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's pick this one out of the hat. Cinema Bun, Cinema Stick. Yeah, let's give it to that.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yeah, just if you're going to watch if you want to watch a movie in 1931 or around that time, just go with the ones I recommended.
Yes.
Frankenstein, Dracula. You won't be disappointed. They're great.
Yeah, those films still hold up in terms of film, in terms of narrative, still relevant today, still watchable. I give this film a 3.5 out of 10, just like a half star above my Broadway, I believe, rating, only because some of the set pieces were interesting and fun, I guess, at least in the very beginning.
And I'm giving this movie a 4.5 out of 10. I don't remember what I gave Broadway anymore. I want to say I gave that a 5. I can't even remember.
I think you were a
So-
little more generous than I was.
Yeah.
I believe you were, but nonetheless. All right, guys. Well, stay tuned for the 5th Academy Award winning picture is a I'm starting to read that book too. And spoiler alert, that book sucks also.
Oh man, here we go again.
I want this pain to end.
There's a bunch of great films, a substantial amount of films, quality production coming up at some point.
Yes, I am looking forward to actually watching some Best Pictures that were actually good.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet, it seems like. We're not going to get there until at least 1934. So we got a couple more years.
And to be fair, we had 2 that were good, Wings
Yes.
and All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yes, those were
We
good
had
at
2
least.
not good. So
Yeah, that's not a good track record
just in,
so far.
just in Broadway, so they're 50-50 right now. So
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
Well, I haven't seen this next film yet. I don't believe you have either. So we'll see. But until then, guys, thank you for tuning in. I am a Yankee.
And I'm a Canuck.
And please like, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Check us out on Spotify. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok. And
We're on
yeah,
everything, man.
We're on everything,
Tune
man.
in. Hit that like button. Check us out. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace out, guys.
Peace.